I need informations. Can you give me an advice? An equipment broke this morning. Do these sentences sound correct? If so, this video is for you. Keep watching to find out why these sentences are wrong and how we can reformulate them to make them correct. Let's go. So, as you may have guessed from the title of this video, the problem with these sentences is that we're working here with uncountable nouns. Now, if you're not familiar with uncountable nouns, let me explain. An uncountable noun, as the name suggests, is a noun that you cannot count. So in very basic terms, it means that you can't make it plural. You can't put an S. Unfortunately, it's much more complicated than that. To give you a couple of basic, very common examples, some words which are uncountable are sugar or money. Here at the Balkan School, we're based in the French-speaking part of Switzerland, and most of our students are French native speakers, and these words are also uncountable nouns in French. So for most of our students, these examples are relatively simple and it's quite logical. But in English, we also have a lot of uncountable nouns which are countable in French and most probably in other languages as well. And these are the words that I find that people really make a lot of mistakes with, understandably. So from our example sentence at the beginning of the video, these are the three most common uncountable nouns I find people make mistakes with: information, advice, and equipment. There are many others, but these are the three that I find come up most often. Particularly here in Switzerland, we have a lot of high-end technical manufacturing, and I spend most of my time working with people in these companies to help them improve their English. So it's a very common, typical problem, particularly with this word equipment. It's very hard to work in a manufacturing environment and not use the word equipment. So it's important that if you're in a similar situation, if you work in a manufacturing context, then you need to understand how to use the word equipment, and that's the real aim of this video. Whilst looking at uncountables on the whole, we're going to focus on the word equipment. So for the format, what I'll do is try to compare a countable noun, in this context machine, with an uncountable noun, in this context the word equipment. And these two words are similar. They're not exactly the same, they're not direct synonyms, but they're very, very similar, very, very close. And for the purposes of this video, it should be okay. So I'll try and give you a list so you can use this as a reference with examples of the most common structures that we find when using these words. So first of all, the countable word with machine, a machine. So it's a countable noun. It's fine to use a, because a means one. You can say one machine or a machine, but a means one. So you're counting it. If you're saying a, you're counting the word. So if you're using an uncountable noun, like equipment, it's not possible to say a, because you're then counting it, and it's not possible to count the word equipment. However, it's not very practical, because sometimes you want to count the word equipment. So instead you need a different construction. So the most common thing that we would say is we would say a piece of equipment. And this can be very confusing to non-native speakers. You think that we're speaking here about just part of the equipment, but we're not. For a native English speaker, when we hear a piece of equipment, we understand one equipment. You just can't say that grammatically in English, so we need to use a different construction instead. So trust me, you need to say this. An equipment is wrong. You can't say that in English. Please try and avoid that. Right, to give you an example with this, you could say, we need a new machine. And if you use the word equipment, you would say, we need a new piece of equipment. Next, if you want to continue counting, you have 2, 3, 100, 1000, etc. You can continue. So with a countable noun, you could say 2 machines, and you add an S. Now the same rules apply with the word equipment as before. Instead of saying 2 equipments, this is wrong, you need to say 2 pieces of equipment. So the same as the first example, we need 2 new machines, or we need 2 new pieces of equipment. So you see the word piece takes the S, because the word piece is being used to quantify the word equipment. I know it seems strange if you're a non-native speaker, but yes, really, this is how we say it in English. Next, Maybe you want to speak in plural terms, but not with a specific number. You can use the word some. So some machines. And this is fine. You can use this with the word equipment. You can say some equipment. Just don't put an S on equipment. Remember, never an S on the word equipment. So an example would be, some machines have stopped working. And with the word equipment, some equipment has stopped working. Now, if you're attentive, you will have noticed a difference between these two examples, and the difference is the verb agreement. You see, as a plural noun, a countable noun, we've used the plural verb form, have. But another important point you need to keep in mind when using uncountable nouns, such as the word equipment, is that you can only use the third person singular form. You see, has, some equipment has. And this is always the case. So you need to remember this uncountable nouns singular verb construction. The word the machines, the equipment. This is fine. Sometimes when I explain this to people, you can't say an equipment. They start saying all the time the piece of equipment, etc. That's not necessary. You can use the word the. Because you're not counting, the word the doesn't define the number. So it's okay to use the word the. It's an that's the problem. You don't need to say the piece of equipment. You can just say the equipment is broken. So it's okay. You can use this. Just make sure again that you don't put an S. Next, if you want to make a question, you can say any machines. And also with equipment, this is okay. You can say any equipment. Again, just no S. And an example with this, are there any machines in that area? Or is there any equipment in that area? Again, verb agreement is important. Plural for countable nouns, singular for uncountable nouns. Next, a lot of machines, a lot of equipment. You can use a lot of with countable and uncountable nouns. And an example, we have a lot of machines on site. We have a lot of equipment on site. So some, any, a lot of, you can use with both. These are safe words. You can use these words with both countable and uncountable nouns. But many and much, this is where a lot of people make mistakes. So with countable nouns, you need the word many. So many machines. And on the other hand, for uncountable nouns, you need the word much. A small tip, which sometimes helps some people remember, is that in the word much, you have a U. So U for uncountable. So much, U, uncountable, use the word much with uncountable nouns. And for some examples, we don't have many machines on site, or we don't have much equipment on site. Now, if you want to make a comparative, you can say more machines than versus more equipment than. This is fine. Again, just be careful with the S. An example, we have more machines here than on our other site. And we have more equipment here than on our other site. So if you're making a positive comparison, it's the same. However, if you're making a comparison on a negative side, there's a difference. So with countable nouns, you would say fewer than, fewer machines than. And with uncountable nouns, less, so less equipment than. Now, most people, even native speakers with this one, make a mistake with the countable noun. People will often say less machines than. And for some reason, people make a mistake, but often native speakers, as I said, with the countable one. So if it's a countable word, like people, chairs, lights, etc., then you need to say fewer machines or lights, etc., than. And less is for the uncountable word. So the example, we have fewer machines here than on our other site. And with equipment, we have less equipment here than on our other site. Another word which is often used with nouns is the word each. Is the word each or every. These are very similar words. There's a small difference, but for today we'll focus on the word each. So you can say each machine, but because you're kind of counting, you're specifying just one, it's not possible to use that with an uncountable noun. So we need to use the construction again, a piece of, and say each piece of equipment. So each machine has its own operating manual, or each piece of equipment has its own operating manual. Now finally, just to clarify, I mentioned this before, but just to make it clear, If you're using a verb after a countable or uncountable noun, then you need to make sure that the verb agrees. So with machine, you would say the machines, with an S, are. You would say the equipment is. For example, the machines on our site are cutting edge technology. Cutting edge, if you don't know that word, it means that they're the latest technology. It's very new, very recent, the most modern technology that you can find. This is a good word to use too in a technological manufacturing context, cutting edge technology. Or the equipment is cutting edge technology. So the idea here is to try and give you a reference to come back to. It's a lot of information to remember, and with practice it can become easier when you speak. But if you're writing a report or a document or an email, then the idea is you can come back to this video and use it as a reference to try and identify what you need to say in your context. So here I've focused really on the word equipment and machine. This is just one example among many examples. Some other words which are uncountable in English and countable in French at least, and possibly other languages as well, are research, training, knowledge, news. It's a strange one for people because there's an S. There's always an S, but it's an uncountable noun. Okay, I received good news. Okay, not a good news. It's a common mistake too. Feedback. This is another one which is uncountable. Now in French they use the word feedback, but they've decided in French when they use it that it's countable. And in English this is an uncountable noun. You can't say a feedback. Most of the time you would just say, can you give me some feedback? But there's no S and you can't say a. Now before we finish, there's another one which is very important because people confuse this a lot. It's the word time. Now in English the word time has two different meanings. It could be time as in time on your watch, or it could be times as in the number of times, as in the number of occasions that something has happened. Now if it's time, like time on your watch, it's uncountable. You never put an S. But if it's times, one time, two times, three times, clearly it's countable, but the meaning is different. So it's very important, particularly when you make the question, that you choose the right form, particularly with much and with many. Otherwise it can be very confusing. So the question, how much time? It's important here because time is uncountable. It's the time on your watch, and much is the indicator that you mean time on your watch, as opposed to how many times. It's how many occasions. Okay, was it once? Was it twice? Was it three times, etc.? So here, if you confuse much and many, the person you're speaking to could be very confused or not understand the right thing. So this is a particular one where you need to be careful and choose the correct form. Okay, that's it for today. Thanks once again for your time. If you found the content interesting, please give the video a thumbs up and like and subscribe. Check out some of our other videos. We've got lots of videos on grammar and vocabulary. If you have any ideas for future videos you'd like us to cover, please don't hesitate to leave a comment. Thanks once again, and until next time, take care. Bye bye.